Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel. It is now time for the meta predictions for NAIC. Of course, NAIC is this Friday. The format's looking pretty interesting. I definitely wanted to give my predictions for where I thought the meta was going to be, what percentage decks are going to be played, all that stuff is going to be discussed within today's video. I'm super excited for NAIC. I'm still figuring out what I'm going to play personally, but I am definitely excited for this tournament. I really wanted to give my predictions of what I think is going to go down at NAIC. It is the first major Twilight Masquerade legal tournament here, and I'm definitely excited for it. If y'all are excited for NAIC too, make sure to leave a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe down below. We're on the road to 15K subs here on the second channel. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into some NAIC predictions. Now, in my opinion, I think the best deck right now is Lugia V-Star. I think Lugia has the chance of being the most popular deck at NAIC. There's a very good chance we could see Lugia quite literally be the most played deck. Now, how popular is it really going to be? I don't think it's going to be anywhere near the levels of where we saw Charizard in the last format. I mean, Charizard was like constantly getting over like 22% meta share. It's not going to happen. I could see Lugia maybe being like 15% of the meta, maybe 16% of the meta at most. I think it will be a popular deck. Lugia is in a very good spot heading into NAIC. I truly do think that it is easily the deck to be right now in the format. It's extremely strong, extremely versatile, and the fact that it just now has access to Iron Hands and Legacy Energy just makes the deck ridiculously broken. I think that its worst matchups aren't even really that bad. I mean, your worst matchup is what, Miraidon? I don't think Miraidon's going to be that great for this tournament, and we'll talk about that a bit later. I don't know if Miraidon's in the greatest spot heading into NAIC. I think Lugia definitely is in a very powerful position, and I think that it definitely will see a lot of play. I, without a doubt, think it's going to be the most played deck at NAIC, and you definitely want to keep this deck on your radar going into this tournament. Lugia does also have a good chance of winning NAIC. If I were to say any deck can win the tournament, I do think Lugia has the highest chance of beating the entire thing. Like, it has the best chance of taking down the entire tournament. But Gardevoir is not too far behind. I mean, a lot of people right now might even call Gardevoir the best deck in the format. I think there definitely is a debate to be had between which deck is the best deck right now. Is it Gardevoir? Is it Lugia? I do think Gardevoir definitely is very strong, but I think Lugia does edge it out slightly. But Gardevoir is also one of the best decks right now, and definitely is another deck that I can see being pretty popular. There's a pretty good chance Gardevoir will be at least 10 to 12% of the NAIC meta. It definitely could be the third most played deck by far. It's doing really good in the online tourneys right now. It's dominating a lot of them. It's doing really good in the IRL scene. A lot of local tournaments that are hosting NAIC practice tournaments. A lot of those tournaments are being won by Gardevoir. A few tournaments here in the GTA in Toronto here have been won by Gardevoir. So yeah, Gardevoir is definitely in a very strong spot right now in the format. And I think will definitely be a very popular deck. It's, in my opinion, going to be at least 10, maybe 12% of the meta. Probably, yeah, 10, 12, somewhere in that range. It's going to be popular. Gardevoir definitely will get top 8. I don't think we won't see a Gardevoir in top 8. There should at least be one Gardevoir in top 8 at NAIC. Gardevoir could get held back by all the counters it's facing, like all the Iron Hands that's going to go around. If we see any dark shenanigans, especially from the Japan tournament we had this past weekend, we did see a Roaring Moon deck in top 8. So Gardevoir could be challenged in that regards, but definitely does feel like Gardevoir is still a strong deck. And with the ability to play Monkey Door Cresselia, your matchup into like Dragapult isn't as bad, and Gardevoir definitely can take down a lot of the big decks. It's really good against Raging Bolt. Your Lugia matchup is definitely also pretty close too. Yeah, Gardevoir seems like it is also very good. Next up is, of course, Raging Bolt. I think a lot of people will say Raging Bolt is a very popular deck, and I definitely agree. I don't think it is the best deck right now. I think that it's a top 5 best deck, but I had to highlight Raging Bolt because there's a very good chance it is going to be one of the most played decks in the room. Like, I know I said Lugia is going to be maybe like 15% of the meta. I can see Raging Bolt maybe being the most popular deck in the room. I mean, yeah, Lugia and Raging Bolt I think are going to be the two decks that will see the most amount of play this weekend. I think we will probably see a lot of Bolt, potentially upwards of 15 to 16% of Raging Bolt. Like, I think both Lugia and Raging Bolt are going to be the most played decks. Raging Bolt will be popular. I don't think it's going to win the tournament. I don't think Raging Bolt is a deck that can win NAIC. Definitely could get a top 8 placement. I wouldn't be surprised if at least one Raging Bolt snuck its way into top 8 at NAIC. It's just the most aggressive, fast go turbo deck in the meta right now, and definitely is the one that does it the best in my opinion, due to the amount of insane damage Raging Bolt can do really quickly. And just having 240 HP also makes Raging Bolt quite a tank. I think Raging Bolt is in a very good spot heading into NAIC still. It's definitely being targeted down. I think there's a lot of decks that can beat it. Like, I think Lugia can beat Raging Bolt. I think Gardevoir beats Raging Bolt. Charizard, obviously. Like, there are decks that beat it, but Raging Bolt just doesn't care sometimes if it has a bad matchup. The fact that it just goes so fast and puts so much pressure on your opponent so quickly is what makes the deck super strong, and there's a very good chance it's going to be one of the most played decks. While I don't think it is one of the best decks for the tournament, or it will win the tournament, it's going to be a very popular deck, potentially the most played deck in the room. Dragapult is also kind of in an interesting spot. We're still trying to figure out what the best way to play Dragapult is. Obviously, we do have the Pidgeot build here with the Neo Upper Energy. This is one of the more common ways it's seen play, and I think it's the one that's actually been now performing the best in online tournaments, is the Pidgeot version of Dragapult. And this might be the best way to play Dragapult. I mean, Pidgeot Charizard did really good last format. Why not just use it with Dragapult too and see how it does? So yeah, I think Dragapult will be a little popular, potentially maybe 10% of the meta. My issue with Dragapult is I just think, one, we're trying to figure out the best way to play it, and two, I just don't think many players are going to commit to Dragapult when we don't know, the best archetype for it right now. People aren't really looking to maybe learn Dragapult for NAIC when, they can play something like Gardevoir or Raging Bolt or Lugia, something a little bit more simpler, or something that you don't have to be as in tune with how to play. Like, I'm sure there will be a lot of people that are going to play Dragapult. There's a good chance some of the big players will be on Pult this weekend for sure, but I don't see Dragapult being that popular overall, because I just don't think as many players are going to be, wanting to play a deck for NAIC that they're not tested as much with. You know what I mean? That's my logic on it. Like, I'm going to be honest, I'm not playing Dragapult for NAIC. Unless something crazy happens between this video going live, I don't think I'm going to be playing Dragapult to NAIC whatsoever. But I think Dragapult will still do pretty well. I think at least one Dragapult archetype will get into top 8. The other Dragapult deck is obviously the Xatu focus build. Some builds do play Pidgeot Xatu. Some builds are just flat out just playing the Xatu as the engine. And this build also might be pretty popular. This one actually could be more common than the Pidgeot build, just because it's not as overcomplicated as Pidgeot is in a way, but definitely feels a little bit weaker than Pidgeot. But it does have more advantages where you do have, a more easy one-price board state. The Xatu does give you better energy acceleration, so you're not as relying heavily on that Neo Upper Energy to help you out. But yeah, Dragapult Xatu might be popular too, might be another way to play it. I think that the Pidgeot build will be the one that will make top 8, but Xatu Dragapult will see play. And then we have the Lost Zone Dragapult deck. I wanted to highlight this deck too. A lot of players are really hyping this deck up. I'm not seeing the hype. I feel like it's a bit of not a weaker version of Sablezard, but it feels like a little bit more of an off the wall version of it, where it's like, okay, I see the vision, but I'm not sold on the deck quite yet. But I do know a few players are probably going to play this deck. They might get day 2 with it. I don't think we're going to see a Lost Bolt in top 8. Maybe we'll see one in top 16. Also, if your opponent flips over a Dreepy, do not expect it to be Lost Bolt. Same thing. If your opponent flips over a Comfey, don't expect it to be Lost Bolt. Expect it to be either Tina or Lost Box before Lost Bolt. That's my take on it. Like, if my opponent's flipping over a Dreepy, I'm just going to be like, they're not playing Lost Bolt. They're probably playing it with Pidgeot or Xatu. That's going to be my opinion on it. It's not going to be the most played Dragapult deck. And in my opinion, you could go the entire, the 15-round tournament and not hit a single Lost Bolt. And then we got Charizard. Charizard, I feel like, is being pretty disrespected right now, and honestly, for good reason. It does have some awkward matchups, for sure. I think your Lugia matchup's getting a little bit worse now. Obviously, your Guardy matchup. I mean, Guardy's actually not that bad of a matchup, but it definitely is a little sketchy still. Obviously, Raging Bolt being probably your best matchup right now, but overall, Charizard has definitely fallen down a couple pegs for sure, and that's just mainly because Dragapult and stuff, all these new archetypes are just starting to bully it out of the format. Though I'm not going to count Charizard out quite yet, I do think Charizard is still a very strong card. I mean, it's Charizard, bro. It's one of the greatest cards we've ever seen. It's just got a ridiculous ability to attack. It just doesn't need to do much to set up. Like, there's a very good chance Charizard still does good at NAIC. It's definitely an underrated deck right now, in my opinion. I'm not playing Charizard for NAIC, but I don't think it's a bad play for the tournament. I do think there will still be some players who will play it. I think Charizard probably does have to play some new technology. I think the big one is playing the Kieran in the deck. Also, I think Maximum Belt is the best A-Spec right now, just due to the fact that it does so good against the Dragapult matchup and so good against Raging Bolt. I'm not saying Raging Bolt's a bad matchup, but just having it makes the matchup even more easier. The one thing Charizard might have to start considering, though, is countering Cornerstone Ogerpon EX. Now, Charizard having to play a Canceling Clone or having to play something silly like a Gouging Fire, it definitely seems like a meme for sure, right? But I do think Charizard might have to start respecting Cornerstone Ogerpon, because if you play against Raging Bull, which usually is a pretty free matchup for Charizard in most cases, well, if they just have a Cornerstone Ogerpon, all of a sudden you just can't win that matchup. So it might be best to maybe tech in a Canceling Clone. And I don't think Canceling Clone's a bad card to play in Charizard, because it does help a little bit against your, matchups like Control and Mimikyu, like any deck with Mimikyu for that matter, right? So could be good to play that. I do think Charizard will see success. I'm even going to go out and say I could see Charizard making top 8 at NAIC. I think there's a good chance that a Charizard deck will make top 8 at NAIC. I think that definitely could happen for sure. I think a few big players will be on Charizard too because, it's still going to be played, right? And I could even see Charizard being like 6 to 7% of the meta for sure because people might just want to play it to NAIC because they don't know what they want to play the tournament. They're just going to play something a little bit more reliable, like Charizard from last format. And then we got to talk about the stall and control decks. Now, I've said this before, but I do not think you want to disrespect stall and control heading into NAIC. It feels like stall and control is in a very good spot right now going into NAIC, and I think it is definitely as a deck you need to keep on your radar. Stall and control is definitely in a very good position right now going into NAIC. Stall itself, Snorlax Stall, does feel a little bit stronger than before now that it has the new Flute card. Definitely does upgrade the deck a little bit. So we could see Stall do good. I definitely would expect to see a Stall get at least a top 16 at the best. And then, of course, Pidgeot control itself definitely is adapting right now. This is one of the more newer ways to play it that's seen play right now is playing it with like the Ogerpon, the Shiyu, the Blood Moon Ursaluna being a really good addition to the deck because it gives you a bulkier late game penny loop target. And then, of course, you have that Great Tusk, which a lot of players are trying out right now as a way to counter Lugia, which is notoriously Pidgeot's hardest matchup. The Great Tusk is a great way to deal with the Cinchinos with a Defiance Band. Also has 250 HP, so it's very hard to KO in return. The one thing Pidgeot might have to deal with is how to deal with Dragapult, because I think Pidgeot can honestly beat Gardevoir, it can beat Lugia. I think it can beat most decks, but it might struggle against Dragapult. That could be its worst matchup. So we'll have to see how Pidgeot Control can deal with the Dragapult matchup. But I definitely would not be surprised if Pidgeot Control had a good run this tournament. Definitely a good chance we'll see at least one Pidgeot Control in top 16, maybe even top 8. I'm going to say right now, I think another top 8 spot will go to Pidgeot Control. Despite the deck being very good for the tournament, I don't think it's going to be a popular deck. There's a good chance you can go through the entirety of day 1 at NAIC and not play against a single control or stall deck. That doesn't mean you shouldn't respect it. I think you should still respect it. Like, whatever deck I'm playing at NAIC should at least have a decent chance at beating stall or control, because I think that those decks are still something you need to respect right now. Even if they're not as popular, I think still a lot of good players are going to play Pidgeot Control. Like I said, good chance we could see at least one in top 8. Now, Lost Box definitely is in an interesting spot. I think outside of potentially a bad Dragapult matchup, it doesn't seem terrible. I think the Guardy matchup is, I guess, slightly awkward. I think it's a little bit of a 50-50 matchup for sure. Gardevoir can be a little annoying. If they're playing the Klefki in the deck, it's really bad. If they're just playing Flutter Mane, you should be playing Iron Bundle. But Lost Box seems like it's in an okay spot. I think its Lugia matchup's pretty good. Obviously, you have the Raikou, which is obviously good in that matchup. You should have good matchups across the board. And I think Lost Box is in an okay spot. It's still a very fast turbo deck. The addition of a Blood Moon Ursaluna does help the deck out. In all honesty, we could see Lost Box get top 8 too. It's another deck that a lot of players just like to play no matter what the tournament is, and it just definitely could be a deck that could just get top 8. I don't think it's going to be like popular. Maybe like Lost Box might be as popular as Charizard is. Maybe like 5% of the meta, 4% maybe. Miraidon. Now, everyone was hyping up Miraidon this format at the beginning because, it won the Champions League. It's definitely a good deck, right? To be honest, Miraidon, I think, has fallen off a little bit. It definitely isn't a bad deck. I think its Lugia matchup is great. I mean, you boast a good Lugia matchup. And that's honestly one of the best things I can say about the deck. You beat one of the best decks in the format, but then you start to run into some issues. I think your Guardy matchup is slightly unfavored. You do have Iron Hands, which helps a little bit, but I still think Gardevoir is a tough matchup just because a lot of your Pokemon get slayed pretty easily by Gardevoir stuff. I think your matchup against Raging Bolt is abysmal. Raging Bolt should be able to beat you easily. I mean, you can't one-shot a Raging Bolt. You might have to start considering playing like 2 Zapdos in your deck or something in order to take down Raging Bolt, because otherwise Raging Bolt is not something you can deal with very easily. You'd have Raichu, and that's about it. So I don't know. Your Raging Bolt matchup isn't very good. I think it's honestly Raging Bolt is just the better turbo deck overall. The other issue I have with Miraidon, it's a very risky deck to play. You're relying very heavily on your generators, whereas Raging Bolt, being the other good turbo deck, doesn't have that risk factor of your generators not hitting. But I still think Miraidon is going to see some play this weekend. Might see one in top 32. I don't think it's going to be that popular, maybe like 3 to 4% of the meta. I want to talk about the Regidrago deck here. This one's, got me pretty hyped. I'm happy to see Regidrago finally be a legit deck that some people might want to consider looking at. Definitely getting the addition of Raging Bolt as an attacker. Having the Dragapults are really good. You're basically a quicker Dragapult than Dragapult itself, because you can attack turn 2 with Dragapult, which the normal Dragapult deck sometimes can't even do that. So being able to do that is really, really good. The Ogerpons just also synergize really nice with Regidrago to build it up even quicker. Regidrago does look to be in a cool spot this weekend. I want to see one do well. I guess this is like my wild card pick. I want to see a Regidrago deck get like at least a top 32. That would make me very happy. Now, Lost Tina is another under-the-radar deck right now. Lost Tina does feel like it's in an okay position this weekend. You should have a good control matchup, a good stall matchup if you were to play Spirit Tomb. Getting Blood Moon or Saloon is nice. You probably have to sub out the Iron Leaves, but honestly, since Charizard has gotten a lot less popular, I wouldn't be surprised if like you hit no Charizard, to be honest. So like you could play Lost Tina, not to worry about Charizard, so you don't need the Iron Leaves anymore. I think your Guardy matchup's close. Your Guardy matchup should be, fairly close. I think your Lugia matchup's okay. You can play the Temple of Sinnoh, which will make your Lugia matchup slightly more favored, right? If you want to deal with Lugia a little bit easier, it is nice to have the Temple of Sinnohs in the deck. Maybe consider playing at Maximum Belt as your ace spec. I've seen a lot of the Tina lists consider playing Maximum Belt. Helps against Dragapult, because against Dragapult, if you get to set up, you do have access to Lost Impact with Max Belt and Star Requiem. You have decent ways of dealing with Dragapult with Tina, so I wouldn't be surprised if Tina did well this tournament. I don't know if it can get like top 8, for example, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe a Tina maybe snuck its way into top 16 at NAIC. Dialga is another deck that feels like it's fine right now. It's in an okay position, kind of carrying over from the Twilight, into the Twilight format. I mean, from the Temporal Forces meta. I don't think Dialga really changes much. I mean, maybe you can play Blood Moon or Saluna. That's about it. Don't think Dialga plays any other new cards, no new ace specs, just kind of stays the same. Dialga's just a very strong deck. Like, it's good. I think it actually beats Dragapult. I don't know about your Guardian matchup. That's probably one of your worst matchups. Your Lugia matchup might be a little tricky too, but who's to say you can't pull off some crazy Star Chronos combos? That's kind of the big thing. The Dialga pilot can always do good with the deck. I think we'll see a couple of Dialga in day 2. Probably not getting higher than like a top 64, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dialga like had somewhat of a showing this weekend. Now, I want to talk about Future Iron Hands, another deck I think that feels a little underrated for this tournament. In theory, the Future Hands deck has an okay Lugia matchup, and I also think that it has an okay matchup against Gardevoir. The deck's now playing Iron Thorns. That's one of the more common cards we're seeing within the deck. It also makes your Lugia matchup even stronger, so we could see the Future, Hands Thorns deck do good. I think it is an underrated deck. Maybe we'll see one in top 8. It's been happening a lot. Iron Hands has been sneaking its way into the top 8 more recently, so maybe there's a good chance that can happen again this weekend. We'll have to see on that one for sure. Then we got the Quad Iron Thorns deck, another like not underrated deck, I want to say, but more just kind of like a fun meme deck. I don't know if we'll see one do well, but I want to see at least one Quad Iron Thorns in day 2. That would make me happy. If we could see at least one Quad Iron Thorns in day 2, that'd be pretty cool. Let's make it happen, folks. Could it happen? Maybe. We'll see. Then we got Goldengo, another like, kind of decent archetype right now. Nothing crazy. Goldengo, it's not a bad deck. I mean, its matchup spread is a little awkward, though. I don't know if your Lugia matchup's great. You might have to consider playing Enhanced Hammer or Temple Sinnoh in the deck. I also think that your Guardian matchup's kind of unfavored. I guess you have Canceling Cologne, which is really your best weapon in that matchup, to be honest with you. Yeah, Goldengo's really cool. I want to see Goldengo do good. I'm a big fan of the Dengo. We'll probably see one in day 2, at least 2, maybe 2 in day 2. Now, C-Pow's another deck that I think is maybe a little underrated right now. I think ultimately your worst matchup might just be the Raging Bolt deck, because you just kind of can't beat them really quickly. Because if you go Shivery Chill, there's a good chance your Shenpao gets KO'd, and then you just lose the prize trade at that point. But I wouldn't mind seeing Shenpao into day 2. It's definitely possible a couple Shenpao could sneak their way into day 2. Your Dragapult matchup could be a little tricky, and that's like one thing to say with the Shenpao matchup, is maybe your Dragapult matchup is a little tricky, but we definitely could see a C-Pow within day 2 at NAIC. I wouldn't be surprised if a few of them snuck their way in and actually did okay. Maybe even like a top 32 run is possible for Shenpao. Obviously, with Charizard getting worse, it definitely is hurting Shenpao's potential. But I would also opt to say your Lugia matchup might not be too bad. You're one of the best decks, actually, that can abuse Iron Hands, right? And that's a really good thing right now in this format. Like, I would argue Shenpao is a good Guardian Lugia matchup. You can beat 2 of the best decks right now. You might struggle against Raging Bolt. You might have to figure out how to beat Raging Bolt. But I think C-Pow is honestly not the worst deck for this tournament. It's surprisingly, like, still not a bad deck. Other than you do lose a few of your good matchups, like Charizard not being the 20% meta share that it used to be. Ancient Box, another underrated deck right now. One thing I will say with Ancient Box, it actually beats Gardevoir really effectively. In fact, I think it might have the best Guardian matchup out of any deck in the format right now. It just destroys Gardevoir. Yes, they have Unfair Stamp, but if I'm playing Ancient Box and a Guardy, I'm expecting the Unfair Stamp. I'm going to maybe set up my board a little bit more before I start playing aggressive, but overall, I think Ancient Box actually has a great Guardy matchup. You'd be surprised how easy the deck just farms it. I think the matchup is very favored for you, and I think your Raging Bull matchup is really good too. You can easily hit high numbers at the end of the game to start one-shotting their Raging Bolts, and yeah, with Charizard falling off, I think it's actually a good thing for Ancient Box. Like, Charizard getting worse is good for the deck. I think your Lugia matchup's not bad either. If I'm playing Ancient Box, I'm playing an Enhanced Hammer at the very least. Your control matchup's not bad. I still think you need to play Penny in the deck. Penny's still very important. You're no longer playing the Cobalion in the deck, so that's like still nice because it's not as easy to trap the Cobalion. I don't know if the Koraidon's good. I think maybe Walking Wake is better. Koraidon Tusk could still be good, though. I'm not too sure yet. Your Lawson matchup's also good for the Roaring Moon deck. Yeah, I just think Roaring Moon is just a strong deck, man. I think Ancient Box, honestly, is a decent play for this tournament if you want to be Gardevoir specifically. And then next up, we have Blissey. I don't know if Blissey's going to be doing that good this tournament, but maybe somebody will crack the code on a really cool Blissey 60, and we'll see one Blissey in day 2. That's my prediction. At least one Blissey could make its way in to day 2. And then we got the Sablezard deck. Now, Sablezard, I think, is an underrated deck, too. It's been doing okay in the online tourney scene. A lot of the builds are now playing the Monkey Dory in the deck, which helps a little bit against Dragapult. We'll have to see how Sablezard can perform. I think we'll see a couple in day 2. It's another deck that people really just like to play no matter what the format is, and I don't think it's a bad play for this tournament. I think it does have some cool additions. Bloom and Ursaluna is not bad, and yeah, you have 2 Charizards in the deck. The other thing with this deck is it beats Raging Bolt, and that's a pretty popular deck. To be fair, if you're playing Sablezard, you might have to consider playing tech cards for Lugia. Like, you're probably going to have to play at least 1 or 2 Temple of Sinnohs, maybe even an Enhanced Hammer, just to beat that matchup. But overall, I don't think Sablezard's in a bad spot. I think your Guardy matchup's fine. You are abusing Sableye. Gardevoir is no longer playing Jirachi because they're now playing Cresselia Monkey Dory. So you can kind of play more Sableyes now, which is good. Sableye's really good in that matchup. So yeah, I think that Sablezard isn't a terrible deck for this tournament. I definitely think we'll see a couple within day 2, maybe even one in top 16. There's definitely a possibility of that. Finally, I want to talk about Turbo Roaring Moon. Now, this one did get top 8 at the recent Japan tournament this past weekend, and I am definitely saying that Roaring Moon kind of feels okay right now. I mean, your Guardy matchup's good, right? And that's one of the big selling points, is playing a deck with Dark Pokemon doesn't seem bad into Gardevoir. Kind of like where I said with Ancient Boxes. I think it's like just playing Roaring Moon doesn't seem terrible this weekend. I don't know how good Turbo Moon is against Raging Bolt, especially when they have the Sandy Shocks as a way to respond to your Frenzy Gouging. But Turbo Moon could be the next best Turbo deck. You got Raging Bolt, you have Moon, and then you got Miraidon in that order. So maybe Turbo Moon is better than we're giving it credit for right now, and we could definitely see a couple Turbo Moons in the tournament. I don't know about Roaring Moon Dunsparce, however. That deck seems to have fallen off. That probably is a little bit worse now because of Dragapult, right? Dragapult just kind of eats up your Dunsparces really easily, and I'm not sure the deck is as good. I will say this, though. Moon Dunsparce has a better time into the stall and control decks than the Turbo build here with Mew and Squawkabilly engine does, mainly because you don't rely as heavily on your stuff getting, being as much of liability. So, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Moon Dunsparce or Turbo Moon had an okay showing this weekend. I could see a couple getting day 2, maybe even 1 or 2 in top 32 or higher. It's possible. I would not be surprised. But there you go. Those are all my predictions for NAIC. I think NAIC is going to be a very interesting tournament. Again, I think Lugia is going to be the most played deck beside Raging Bolt. It's going to be a toss-up between the two. I would give the edge to Lugia, but I definitely think Raging Bolt Lugia are going to be competing for most played deck. I think Lugia has the best chance of winning NAIC. Gardevoir is going to be really popular too, probably the 3rd most played deck. Raging Bolt, obviously going to be very popular, too. A lot of players are really high on the deck right now, so wouldn't be surprised if we saw a couple Raging Bolts do really good this tournament, too. So, yeah, those are my predictions for NAIC. Definitely going to be an interesting one for sure. Let me know what you think is going to do good at NAIC. I'm very interested to hear, and hopefully my predictions are accurate. We'll have to see how it all goes, and hopefully I see some of y'all at NAIC. Don't be afraid to come up and say hi and all that good stuff if you see me this weekend at NAIC. I always love talking to fans and meeting people. It's a fun time. So hope to see some of y'all there. Thanks for watching this video. Let me know what some of your predictions for NAIC are down in the comments below. If you're new to the channel, subscribe down below. Help me on the road to reaching 15K subs, and I'll catch you on another video here. Bye-bye.